So hello, everyone. I'm Rita McGrath from the Columbia Business School. Welcome to our Friday Fireside Chat. And I'm totally thrilled to have as my guest this week, Victoria Montgomery-Brown, who is founder, CEO, entrepreneur, and now, one of the reasons that she's here is she's just written a fabulous book called Digital Goddess. And it's a true story of her life as an entrepreneur, CEO and founder. And as I like to say, she's an actual entrepreneurship 101 type founder, not one of those people that has a $96 billion valuation and goes off. Just a couple of notes to be aware of. This is being recorded, so do not say anything you do not wish your mother or the New York Times to find out about later. And we'll have the replays available after a few days. We usually have them on my YouTube channel, so you'll be able to see them. So Victoria, welcome.
Thank you so much, Rita.
It's a pleasure to be here. And you and I first met, it's got to be years ago now. I think I was one of the inaugural Big Think sort of.
You were.
In the mix. I think that was my last book, the book before this last one. Wow, that's great. That's great. So tell us, just for people that don't know you, how you got to found Big Think. What was the journey like before that?
So I graduated from business school in 2003. And one of the things I write about in the book is sometimes things that you don't want to happen actually turn out to be beneficial. So when I graduated from business school, it was a really bad economy, as some people may remember. And I thought I wanted to maybe get some experience in banking or consulting or something like that. But people were very lucky to be getting the job or go back to the industry from whence they came. And I came from a film background, and it was really difficult for me to get jobs in the business sector. And so I ended up going and working in television for 2 years, which I thought was sort of a failure, but it turned out to be a big boon because I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and it jump-started that process because I didn't have golden handcuffs or anything like that. And so I started a company with my business partner, Peter, in 2006, and we had seen a dearth of thoughtful content on the internet. And so it was a big opportunity for us to basically create something that we thought would be valuable for the audience with people like you. And so it was really, as I said, kind of that failure, seeming at first, was a big boon to start Big Think.
That's interesting. So tell us a little bit about the core concept that got you going on Big Think, because I think it's a really interesting idea, very compelling.
Thank you. Yeah, so we, as I said, saw a dearth of thoughtful content on the internet, and YouTube had just kind of started when we started Big Think. And so we thought, there are all of these incredible people like you who only other incredible people get to have access to. And so we pitched to our initial investors the concept of Davos democratized. Elite people get to go to this elite conference and only talk to other elite people. And why wouldn't notable people want to share their expertise with a much wider audience? And so that's how we came up with the concept. And we've really remained true to it to this day, actually.
Mm-hmm. But you've evolved it now. You're getting more into the online education and skilling arena, as I understand it.
Absolutely. So initially we were supported by sponsorship and advertising. And so we would work with large enterprise companies doing external marketing, essentially. It was never basically advertorial or anything like that. It was always content that we would have created. And in the context of doing that, these companies said to us, what you're doing for us externally is so amazing, but we really need internal learning and development. And could you create some content that would help our employees at all levels of the organization be better? Mm-hmm. And so that's how we came up with Big Think Edge, which is a fundamental part of our business today.
Oh, interesting. So you're really ahead of the time. At times, I mean, everybody's looking for what the solution is.
I hope so.
Now, so that's the sort of nicely packaged version of it, but the sailing was not always smooth on your way to where you are right now. Maybe you could tell us the story about how you got arrested?
Sure. So,
because nice people who graduate from Harvard Business School aren't supposed to get arrested before they've even launched their business.
That's right. And as a friend of mine said, there are no classes at Harvard Business School that teach you how to deal with your arresting officer or anything like that. So, it was in 2007. It was a few weeks before we were going to launch. So we launched on January 8th of 2008. And I was coming out of Union Square subway station, and it was the era of the flip phone. And I typically don't answer calls from numbers that I don't recognize, but something told me to answer this call. And so I picked it up, and this man, in a kind of laughing tone, asked who I was, and is this Victoria? I said yes. And he said, a powerful man is sort of angry with you, and you need to come to this police station. And I, being sort of naive and I guess immature at this point, was like, oh my gosh, okay. And so I jumped into a taxi and went to this police station. And when I arrived there, there was a senior detective, New York NYPD, and it was not a fun situation. And essentially, I had kind of rubbed somebody the wrong way because I had left. I was working at his organization, and he was not happy with me and put into motion a whole series of events that had me arrested. Now, are you looking at a felon or anything like that? No. But it was a test to me very early on as an entrepreneur, because we had recently got investors, and I could have just buried it under the carpet and said nothing. But this was an opportunity for me initially to be very transparent. And so as much as I didn't want to do it, I called every single one of our investors. I didn't know how they would respond at all. But much to my surprise and delight, they actually took it very, very well. And I think it built a foundation of trust for me that has lasted to this day. And so I would say to anybody who's an aspiring entrepreneur, the best thing that you can do is be as transparent as possible and deliver the hard news quickly and as brutally as possible.
Well, it turned out to be completely baseless, right?
Yes, it did.
It was like a backroom deal between these powerful people.
That's right.
And I won't say who, but I bet you were smiling some years later.
Maybe.
Secretly, quietly smiling.
Yeah.
Okay. So you did start the business, got it sort of rolling. So what were the first few months of that like?
Well, the first few months of it were essentially I was a gopher and my business partner was a gopher. And I think a lot of people don't understand that as an entrepreneur at the early stages, especially if you're not very well funded, you have to do it all. So everything from initially finding an office to, I had never even thought about this, finding an accountant to deal with things like payroll and our bills coming in and stuff like that. So it really, in the first few months, Peter and I had to put on every single hat, from real estate agent to head of HR to anything to get things done. And our business, as you know, is about getting fantastic people like you to sit in front of a camera for an interview. So we also were the head bookers. We did all of the prep, interview questions. We even edited the transcripts and things like that. And so I think actually, instead of being really well funded, which we were not, I think that was lucky because it forced both he and I to understand every aspect of the business. And that's what I would encourage entrepreneurs to do as well, is not just hire people to do everything for you at the start, but to get in there in the weeds and learn exactly what it is your business is doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and one of the things that's been very exasperating would be the word I would use for me over the last 10 years is all these businesses that sort of shouldn't exist, but somebody thought they were a great idea. And so they metaphorically back this truck up full of money. I was talking to Joanne Wilson about this last week, and she said, oh yeah, it's like there's a river of money just running down. I lean behind my desk and I pick it up. And one of the problems with that is, traditionally Entrepreneurship 101 says you have an idea, right? You find product market fit, and then you go to market and you sort of, start earning transactions, and then you can scale, right? And what a lot of these companies have done is they sort of had an idea, they skipped over that middle bit, and then they went right into scaling. And so what we found, and it took a lot longer than I expected it to, but what we're finding now is a lot of those businesses are in kind of an emperor has no clothes moment where, they're just not economically viable. So I kind of applaud you for doing it the sort of Entrepreneurship 101 way.
Well, I also find that some of the people who have started these incredibly well-funded businesses, like I'm forgetting his name, but the founder of WeWork, there's an initial huge success and then a failure, but these failures are rewarded with huge amounts of money. I mean, he got a huge golden parachute for a business that is not doing well at all, and I simply don't understand that.
Mhm. Yeah, it just sort of defies logic. Well, my theory on this is that it's partly a byproduct of income inequality because you've got all these people with all this money. You've got zero interest rates, basically. So what are you going to do with it? There's only so many pairs of pants and yachts and airplane flights you can take. So it goes into anywhere it can find. And so it's just like and I think also when you think about the multiple round investors, the early guys are betting that somebody will come along later and bail them out. And so it's like this sort of like a Ponzi scheme almost. But anyway, so not all roses and glory. Maybe talk a little bit about the emotional toll it can take on you as an entrepreneur, because it is hard. I mean, you do everything every day. You're working your heart out. You come home and drop into bed at whatever it is. And then you get up and do it all again the next day. So how do you kind of cope with that?
Well, I would say, just to be clear, I really have loved being an entrepreneur and still do, but it has taken an emotional toll. And as I've said, quite frankly, for me, there has been almost no work-life balance over the past 13 years. And I'm changing that now. You can see I'm in Colorado and enjoying that. But yeah, it's been difficult. And I felt that the weight of the world was on my shoulders for a whole bunch of years. I was responsible for the investors, to the employees, to our clients, instead of realizing that, life is short and don't take everything so seriously. But over the years, I've dealt with mental issues and depression and things like that. And my business partner, about 3 years ago, I was on a downward spiral of thinking the world was coming to an end because all I was focused on was big think. And he said to me, Victoria, the last year, it's been really difficult to be around you because you're constantly in crisis mode and planning for the worst versus planning for the best or seeing the possibility. You're always thinking, bad things are going to happen and preparing for that. And so I remember in San Francisco, and he said, it's come to the point where I can't deal with you anymore and you really need to go and get some help. And so I was sort of embarrassed about it at the time, but I eventually went and got some help and saw a psychiatrist and was put on antidepressants. And that's really helped me. I mean, eventually I'm sure I'll come off them, but it was an intervention that I desperately needed and was so appreciative about. And so I would say to anybody who is an entrepreneur or in any business role or any role at all, essentially, that there's nothing to be embarrassed about if you're suffering from anxiety or depression, and the sooner you can go and get help for it, the better.
That's so brave of you to say, and I really appreciate it. One of the groups I belong to is a writers group called Silicon Guild, and we had a very interesting conversation a couple of weeks ago. One of our members is a guy named Lenny Mendonca, who, very much sort of McKinsey senior partner and sort of helping the governor of California cope with wildfires and God knows what. And he went through depression and he was very honest about it. And as we dug into it, what I learned that I had not known was 1 out of 3 people, in the developed world are going to be dealing with depression or anxiety or some other kind of mental issue, at some point. Mm-hmm. And that getting help is not a sign of you're not a good person or whatever. It's just, it's necessary sometimes. You're not going to be able to dig yourself out of that. And so your partner, I know, has been just a wonderful kind of work marriage for you. How did that happen? And how did you know that this would be a great guy to spend, a couple of decades with?
Well, he and I worked together for a couple of years prior. And to be honest, I think the only person Peter has worked with in his professional life is me, and that's been for 15 years, so it's quite a long time. But when we were working together initially, I just thought that he was super interesting, and we had the same sense of humor, and we, years ago, actually decided to write a TV pilot together, and we pitched it to CBS and NBC and got pretty far down the road, and that was an initial test. And then we also started a blog, which was picked up by AM New York, and so we sort of had tested the waters before, and then while we were working at this other job, began to discuss, what we saw, our ambitions for the future, et cetera, and they were quite well aligned. And so we decided to go and do it. I quit my job first, and he joined me a couple of months later. So that's how it came to be.
Wow, that's a big step, though. I mean, for a lot of people, and I think this is a very interesting time in history to be talking about this, because so many people have had their tidy expectations about what the next few years hold, completely uprooted. I mean, you've got people who thought they would be going to college, and you've got people who thought they would be starting jobs. Our summer interns at my company, are sort of an indefinite hold. They're furloughed, they don't know what's happening. But I think for a lot of people, it kind of puts the idea in the back of their mind, gee, maybe I should go out on my own and stop being beholden to the man and stop, having to listen to somebody else. What was it like to finally get to the point of making that decision?
It was very exciting. I mean, it was nerve-wracking as well. I mean, I didn't have savings or anything to fall back on. And so, again, I think that this was actually a benefit to me because I really had to go and do it. And as I say in the book, I think that investors also want to know that you're all in. And if you have a job, whatever it may be that you're focusing on, they don't necessarily believe that you're going to make the big go. And so quitting my job was nerve-wracking, but it was really necessary. And it actually catapulted me into really working full-time on Big Think and getting it to happen far sooner than it would have if I had a 9-to-5 job or 9 to 11 or whatever it might have been.
Yeah. And you find for a lot of successful entrepreneurs, that transition moment is that moment when your head just kind of goes, okay, this is my future. This is what I'm going to make it. Whereas a lot of people who are more tentative and kind of hedge their bets, they never really get that sort of escape velocity to kind of keep going.
That's right.
So, you're not that old, right? And so, so here you are, an entrepreneur, getting started with this novel business concept. But this is a time in your life when many people are sort of dating and hanging out with the other people. And what's that like when you've got a business that takes like 110% of your energy, and then you're trying to do personal things on the side?
Well, I was actually living with somebody at the time we started Big Think. And he and I got engaged, and I would say I put my personal life entirely on the back burner, which I would not encourage people to do. You do have to focus on the business, but also include fun parts of your life, like your personal life. It was difficult, I think, both for him and for me. We were going to have a wedding in Ireland, and I was just so obsessed with the business that I decided one day, like, let's just forget about this big wedding thing and go to City Hall, which we did. And my parents were super upset about it. We eloped to City Hall. It was just a regular day. It was a work day even. I didn't go back to work that day, but I did go back to work the next day. And so I think not giving my personal life the attention it required to, be a fulfilled person early on as an entrepreneur was what I did. Now, I don't know that if I hadn't done that, we would have been successful. But if I could go back and change things, I think I would have basically focused a little more on my personal life and those around me versus just the business.
Well, and I also think sometimes the business, it's like the old principle, work expands to fill all available space, it contracts too. Sometimes I find that one of the one of the realities of being an entrepreneur is, you come from that space where you're literally doing everything. And if you don't pick up that whatever it is and put it over there, it's not going to move. And then once you get past that stage, I think sometimes people never get out of that mode. It's like, that becomes sort of your way of being.
That's right. And, we ended up actually getting divorced. And I think it was in large part due to my lack of attention. He and I are still very, very good friends, and we see each other all the time. But had I invested more in that relationship, I think it might have sustained.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you never had kids or anything, right?
No.
Was that part of the plan, or that was just off the table for you?
No, it wasn't. It was sort of part of the plan, but I was too busy to focus on it. And I guess when I was 38, I froze eggs. So it's not off the table still, but I think that, taking that time to basically think of my personal life as also a business, like I'll go and freeze eggs and do that type of thing, is the way that, I was managing my personal life like a business as well. So anyway, I don't live like that anymore, but.
So you're reformed now.
Yeah.
So for those who have just joined us, my guest is Victoria Montgomery-Brown, and we're talking about her forthcoming book. It's going to be published October 6th. Am I right about that?
Right.
Called Digital Goddess, and it's available for pre-order. So if this stuff sounds interesting to you, you've been incredibly honest about it in the book. And I think one of the, a lot of business stories, business memoirs kind of have an eraser that goes over the the bits that are unflattering or, gee, I got that really wrong. But this book doesn't. So tell us a little bit about who it's for, what got you to write it?
Yeah, so it's really for entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, no matter the gender. Over the years, I've received a lot of emails and calls and things from, in particular, young women who are aspiring entrepreneurs. And so it's specifically or particularly aimed at them, but I don't think it's solely for women. But that's really the impetus that got me to write it. And also, Peter, my business partner, said, there aren't a lot of female CEOs who started their own business, and I think you have an interesting story to tell and could be helpful to people, especially women. And so that was really the catalyst. Those two things were really the catalyst to get me to write it.
And the book really takes you through, lots of turns and twists. Were there some of the biggest surprises that sort of you talk about in the book, or anything that kind of comes to mind is, yeah, I wasn't expecting that, aside from getting arrested?
As a young woman, I wouldn't have anticipated that particularly older men would be so supportive of what I have done, and in fact critical to it. The large majority of big things investors are men, and they really, many of them have been mentors to me, and that's not something I truly would have anticipated. And they've taught me how to behave and interact in business, and also be myself and use being a woman to my advantage. I know that there's a lot of thinking out there that you sort of have to pretend to be a man or that type of thing in business. And I would say absolutely not. I've used being a woman massively to my advantage, and it's a good thing.
Say a little more about that, because I think that's something we have very fractious ideas about. So there's one school of thought that says, oh no, we should all be, we should be gender blind and we should be behaving neutrally. And then there's another school of thought that basically says, hey, I've got enough to deal with. I have one advantage in my favor. I'm going to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think truly that in this day and age, many men want to be encouraging of women in business, and they also want that woman to be a woman, not, another type of dude. And so I just feel that, over the years, I've used my femininity to my advantage by basically asking these men for help and saying, yes, I'm paving somewhat of a new road. Can you help me? And I think that they really, really appreciate that. And it's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to take pride in. And, women are seen as nurturers. And that's something that a lot of women in business shy away from. And that's been super helpful to me with the investors, but also my employees. As in one chapter where I say trying harder to be softer, initially on, I thought that I had to be tough as nails and know the answer to everything and basically be what I thought a male CEO should be. And over the years, I realized that my femininity and soft side could be an advantage. And I think our employees have certainly seen me develop that way and embrace my femininity and become a better leader because of it.
How many people work for Big Think now?
We now have about 20 full-time employees and around 40 freelancers.
Wow.
Which, ebbs and flows.
Well, in your kind of business, it would, wouldn't it? Right?
Yes.
So how did you get the initial sort of people, who would be your speakers or your thought leaders? How did you get them to agree to work with you?
Well, really, because we're a mission-driven company, it was all about the mission. And so, again, you kind of have to do what it takes to get the people to come. But our first few guests included Larry Summers, Richard Branson, Moby, bizarrely, and Robert Thurman, who's a professor at Columbia, actually. And we guessed their emails. Moby I had tangentially knew, and we just told them what we thought we wanted to do, which was share their expertise with a much wider audience. And it's not designed to be political. It was about significant, relevant, and actionable content that would stand the test of time. And unbelievably, they liked this and came on. And so something that I would say to people is, don't limit yourself. These were world famous people that we did not know, and they said yes day one. And so once we got the first few people, it was much easier to get the rest. And one thing that I will say is that we would not have got funding if we did not have those 4 people to agree, because the investors were asking us, or potential investors, what makes you think that you can get these people? You better actually show us that you can. Mm-hmm. And so that's when Peter and I went, on the offensive and started booking people like crazy. And yeah, the first few were not easy, but it really was like a rolling stone. And then people started to come to us. And now about 80% of the people that we interview are pitched to us.
That's really interesting. And do you have a set of criteria that you look for, which would say, yes, this person, no, that person?
Yes. So we've interviewed and had people on Big Think that run the gamut, from athletes to Nobel laureates to business people, world leaders, etc. But it's something about, can this person help me be better personally or professionally? So I used the example before of Larry Summers. And so having him on, we don't ask him about what happened in the economy yesterday, what he thinks is going to happen in the economy in the future. It's much.
Maybe you should explain who he is, because not everybody's going to know.
So yeah, he was the former president of Harvard and Treasury Secretary under Clinton, and then chief White House economist under Obama. So a very, very super intelligent man, and he's been on Big Think and huge supporter of Big Think since its inception. And so he is often on the news talking about the economy. And so while, it's super interesting to talk with him about that, we want our audience to have something that they can look back to and improve their own lives, personally or professionally. So he's been on Big Think a number of times, and he taught a master class on how to make difficult decisions. So the way that we think about it is, whatever this person's background, what is unique about them that they can teach, share their knowledge with our audience and expand them. So another example I like to use is Shane Battier, who is a former NBA all-star player, and he now coaches the Miami Heat. And he came on Big Think, and this is very popular with our financial services audience, interestingly enough, about how to use data to improve your performance. And so that's not something that you would expect from an NBA player, but it's super interesting, and he really breaks it down and speaks about how data has improved his performance, and something that you or I could certainly use.
Absolutely. That's fascinating. So were there any speakers who sort of surprised you with what they ended up saying?
There have been a few speakers that have been unpleasant, who I won't mention, that their public persona is much different than their in-person persona. So I've had a few surprises like that, but by and large, I've been so surprised by how warm and generous everybody has been with their knowledge, and how prepared they are. They don't come in with a set of questions or anything. We prepare and we hope what we know we're going to get from them. And it's just unbelievable to see these people's minds at work. And that's been the surprising thing. And then also people that I genuinely hadn't heard of before, that I met and just loved. So for instance, the poet laureate Billy Collins from years ago was one of the first interviews that I did. And he's been one of my favorites. He read a poem on Big Think, etc. And so I guess what's been one of the most surprising and lovely things is my mind being open to people that I had no knowledge of before, and the gift that Big Think has provided me to grow that knowledge and on a daily basis.
That's wonderful. So just like a little peek behind the curtain. So one comes into your studio, yes. Right? What happens next?
So, well, we book the person. We have a booker who does it. They come in. We have an interviewer and a director. And so, like, when you came in, it didn't seem very high production, but there is a lot of instructional design that goes in behind it, so that we are asking, or whoever is interviewing, the questions so that we get the good content. So the person comes in, it's an Errol Morris style camera or contraption. So like you and I are looking at each other now, that's how the interview is conducted. So the interviewer is not filmed, but they're having a conversation with the interviewee, so that it's genuine and authentic. it's taped. It usually lasts about an hour. We get 10 clips or so from the interview. Some of them are designed for learning, corporate learning and education, or personal development, and the majority of it is for our public audience. And, you know, after that, it's edited, and it's the majority of our content is evergreen. I mean, we have an interview. One of our first interviews was with Ted Kennedy, which was actually his last interview, and that gets played. Yeah, it was actually his last one in DC, and that one people visit a lot because one of the questions we asked early on every single guest was, "What is love?" And the answers we get from people have been so interesting and not what you would expect.
So you start off with these first four. You get some investor money. Now, did you have clients already, or was it then a matter of going and finding people that might have an interest in this content?
We had to get clients really quickly. We did not raise that much money, so we didn't have a long runway. So as soon as we received the money, the question was, what is our business model? And before we had even launched Big Think, we had Pfizer as a client, because we said, you know, we have all of these incredible experts, even though we don't have a website yet. Wouldn't you like your brand to be associated with it? And so that was our initial business model. So sponsorship, not advertorial, as I said. So one of the first sponsorships we did was with Intel, where they obviously wanted to present themselves as an innovative company. And so we said, okay, why don't you sponsor a series called Moments of Genius? And we had, I think it was 12 individuals come on and talk about how they had come to build whatever their business was or their invention. So for instance, we had Elon Musk talking about SpaceX and Tesla. This was years before he was the household name he is now. The fellow who identified the HIV virus, I'm forgetting his name, but people like that. And so it was content that we were really proud to produce. We would never have created content that was just about advertising, but the business model really lent itself to what our product was. But it was imperative that we do it immediately. And then obviously our business model grew, but we had such a short runway. We had clients before we'd even launched our website.
Which is a super important point that a lot of entrepreneurs miss. You know, I mean, and I used to teach entrepreneurship 101, and you know, a lot of entrepreneurs they think it's all about, I need to find an office and I need to hire an assistant and I need to get my name on the door and they think of everything except getting that first client in the door. And I think that's often what makes the difference between the ones that don't make it and the ones that eventually find out they have a runway. So when you first started, you had sponsors, and was the content free at that point?
Yes, the content was free. And initially, you know, we've learned so much along the way about search engine optimization, etc. We only had video, and we didn't understand that it wasn't going to be searchable enough. And so we started putting in articles, which became some of them became sponsored as well, but everything was free. It's only been in the last maybe 6 years that we've had 2 other content offerings. One is the subscription offering, which is Big Think Edge for internal learning and development, as I mentioned, in corporations. And then we had so many individuals request access to it that we also created a B2C, so business to consumer version of that in the last 2 years as well.
That's really interesting. So here we are now, we're all doing this, right? Virtual, you know, stuff. Do you think that's going to have an impact on Big Think's business?
Absolutely. I mean, our lease was up for renewal in, I guess it was August, and we've been in that one office space for 12 years. We had another little office before that, and we decided this year not to renew our lease because we're doing everything like this at the moment, and people are unwilling at the moment to come into offices. So it didn't make sense for us to be keeping that overhead. And we also launched a new product line, and you were, I think, maybe the first or second one to participate, which was our Big Think Live webinars. And I was discussing with somebody yesterday, it's actually really increased the amount of content that we are creating, video content, because we're able to get incredible people on such short notice. For instance, in the next week, I think we're having Malcolm Gladwell on. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, he's been on a few times, but typically it would be, 6 months booking process. Whereas now people are much more available. A few weeks ago, I interviewed Penn Jillette, and again, he is an agent and things like that. And typically it would be, 8 months or something, and then maybe it would be rescheduled or whatever, but he's now in his home in Las Vegas, and half an hour of his time is not such a big deal as it might have been getting on a plane and coming to us. So I think it certainly changed our business model, and I think it's fundamentally changed the world's business model.
Yeah. And do you think those are going to be permanent changes? I mean, I get this question all the time, which is once we get through whatever this is, I don't even know what to call it anymore. Are the changes going to stick? Are some things going to be the same? And my standard response is, I think it's going to be a lot harder to justify getting on a plane, and going to Singapore or something for an hour and a half speech. And I think that's probably not going to be there. The other thing, though, that a lot of people I don't think have quite realized yet is with so much video content out there, your ability to get paid for running around the world doing the same stump speech for 45 minutes over and over and over again, I think that's really going to be commoditized. I just don't think you'll be able to do that. So I think the speakers and thinkers that are going to be in demand are the ones that are helping people make sense out of stuff, or as you said, the ones that offer this evergreen kind of future-oriented content.
Yeah, and I think people who have actually done things, I know people want to learn from people that they can actually demonstrate what has this person done, and versus, people that are just, like you said, sort of going around the world giving the same old speech again. It's like, well, I heard that before and it's not really affecting me personally. And so, yeah, and to go back to your point about the business model changing, I have a friend who's senior in McKinsey, and she used to spend probably 20 days a month traveling, and she hasn't traveled since March, and the business hasn't changed. In fact, I think they're doing better in her line there. And the company, I'm sure all companies are going to be looking at the bottom line and thinking, well, look, the amount of money we spent on travel was just ridiculous, and it's going to be much more profitable for us if we keep to the way things are now. At least, cutting back travel, I'd say, by probably 2/3. Now, I'm not an expert on that. That's just my sense.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's early days yet. I suspect what we're going to find is that a lot of business travel is going to get to be a luxury good, that you'll still need to, if you're doing a big mega merger or whatever, you're still going to need to, eyeball people across the table. But a lot of, weekly update meeting, I mean, or my friends that are consultants and they leave on Sunday and come back on Thursday, I think there's going to be a lot of rethinking of that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we talk about a lot when we look at women in leadership in particular is how women network. And one of the sort of stereotypes about women and their networks is that women tend to build very dense, very trusting, very close networks of people that, you can complete each other's sentences, what the other person's going to do next and so forth. And that they sort of neglect those broader entrepreneurial networks that are often the way you get a job or open up an opportunity, because if you just stick to the close network, you all have knowledge that's the same. Whereas the more spread out networks, you get introduced to new ideas and knowledge that's really different. And I just loved, did you sort of have a philosophy about networking? Did you go about it deliberately? I mean, coming from Harvard Business School, that's a pretty good start, but.
I didn't have a philosophy about it. I think it was fundamental to network. So reaching out to these initial experts and then thousands more over the years, that was fundamental to the business and shaped my network. I mean, I can't say that all of the experts that have been on Big Think are part of my personal network, but a lot of them are. And so it wasn't exactly a strategy that I had in mind. It was just a desperate need. But it's proved, incredibly powerful. In fact, the name Digital Goddess, the book title, was given to me by, unfortunately, the late David Stern, who was commissioner of the NBA. And I got to meet him because of Big Think and be on a panel at the Aspen Ideas Festival with him. And so that's somebody that I never would have met if I had just sort of stuck to my little network and not done things that are slightly fearful. I mean, that was not an easy panel for me to be on. As I've said to people before, I felt like a diversity advocate with these incredible group of people on it. But then I realized there's something that another Big Think expert, John Seely Brown, I don't know if he coined the term, but he certainly says it a lot, which is reverse mentoring. And I constantly thought that I was on the receiving end of all of these people's incredible wisdom and was sort of not at their level and shouldn't be at the table. And over the years, I've come to discover that it did actually help them understand things in a way that they might not have 30 years, because I was 30 years younger and a female entrepreneur. And typically in these situations, maybe one of two women at the table, if there was even another one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of research that suggests if you're going to present a hiring panel with a group of candidates, if you only present one woman, it actually diminishes the chances she'll get an offer because she's seen now as the divergent choice. She's seen as the riskier choice. So you have to have two or preferably three. Yeah, very interesting research on this stuff. Yeah, absolutely fascinating. So you got to Aspen partly because you're a woman, right? I mean, they were looking for somebody different, right?
Yeah, I looked at the list and I just thought, I simply don't deserve to be here. And I almost was thinking like I shouldn't go because it was a 3-day discussion where, 8 hours a day, people like the CEO of Caterpillar and things like that. And I run a little startup. I don't know what I can teach these people. But it turned out that, I've kept in touch with most of them and we bounce ideas off of each other. And they don't often get to see the way small businesses actually work. And a lot of their buyers and clients are people like me, and they can learn from small businesses as well.
That's really inspiring. That's terrific. So clearly there have been turns and twists in the business that required you to do something that was kind of out of your comfort zone. Do you have a moment or two like that you'd be willing to share?
Sure. I mean, I can give one that was actually required me to meditate afterwards. I think it was 2015, I organized a lunch with some of our investors, essentially to figure out the future of Big Think and pick their brains. And it was at a restaurant in New York, and I think there were 15 of us there. And as CEO, I knew that I had to welcome them and give a little speech or something like that. And this was the first time it happened to me, but I actually had a panic attack at the table. Like I started to talk to myself before I stood up to speak. And there was a long-winded thing that I was going to say and basically moderate a discussion. And I stood up and said maybe 3 words, and then our COO had to take over. That was deeply uncomfortable for me. And going forward, if I had obsessed about that, I maybe would have been unable to continue or do things like that again. But it's basically like getting back on the horse. So I forced myself to do it again. And there's no doubt about it. It was going on in my mind, please don't let me have a panic attack. But things like that have been uncomfortable for me. And I will say that at that lunch, Larry Summers, who we spoke about, was there. And he helped me immensely during that time. And 3 weeks later, I knew a call was going to come. He did call me and say, Victoria, that was really not a good performance on your part. And what can you learn from it? And we talked about it. And I appreciated that because I knew everybody noticed that I was not doing well at that lunch. And actually having somebody talk to me about it was sort of embarrassing, but really, truly helpful and helped me grow.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that, again, back to this Women in Leadership course that we're running. Oh, and I should put in a plug for it. It runs next, we started on the 15th of September. So there's still time if you want to register for it. But one of the topics is actually this really difficult topic of receiving and giving feedback. Mm-hmm. And that, without somebody to really give you that honest feedback, it's very hard to grow. It's very hard to see what others see because, all of us have this problem, right? So it's just like, you can't get outside yourself and see, although I guess now that every minute is being recorded on video, maybe that becomes easier. Do you have any experiences with feedback? That was one that really made a difference for you?
Yes, I think that one of our advisors is Rob Kaplan, who is now the head of the Dallas Fed. He was a professor at Harvard Business School and vice chairman of Goldman Sachs. And look, I'm CEO of a small business, but can tend to be isolated and isolating. And early on, Peter and I, the co-founder, and I separated ourselves in a separate office. And so we weren't mingling with our staff, which separated us physically, but also mentally from people, and I think it made it a challenge for them to talk to us and come to us with their issues. And so I remember Rob being in our office once, and he had a book out, I think it was called The Man in the Mirror. I'm misquoting it, but essentially a chapter in his book is about how leaders in organizations, no matter the size of the organization, sometimes tend to separate themselves, and people are afraid to give them feedback. And that can lead to them making really stupid decisions, and also thinking that they have to know everything. And early on, he spoke to me about that, and that was some critical advice. Peter and I changed where we sat, and it was actually a much more pleasant experience. And so little things like that can make a big difference.
Absolutely. One of the things that I write about in the book, Seeing Around Corners, which is about strategic inflection points, is, how often the senior folks are just out of touch. Nobody's telling them what's really going on. They don't have ways of getting unfiltered information. And as a consequence, somebody in the organization knows what's happening, but it never sort of makes its way to the hallowed halls of the senior leadership. So yes. That's kind of challenging. So what are you seeing as the next steps for Big Think and for yourself? You're all virtual now, right? A lot more video. You're starting new series. Is this a big turn, or do you see it more of an evolution?
I think it's more of an evolution. I think we're going to focus increasingly on learning and development and that side of things. Obviously, we still need to have a large audience because it attracts experts to come. They want to reach our audience as well. So I see us investing in growth in our reach, a lot more production, and also diversifying the type of content that we're creating. Maybe some longer form content. Typically our content is between 3 and 6 minutes. We're seeing, especially in this time, that people are open to even hour-long content that's recorded or whatever. So I think that is what we're going to be focusing on in the future, and obviously getting more business.
Right, sure. And what kind of, like, if you had to pick 3 ideal types of clients, who would you be looking to recruit?
Well, large corporations, I think, are our bread and butter and have been. So more of those. But since we've been focusing on B2C, I think individuals in terms of subscribers is a big push of what we're going to be doing. We had never thought of individuals as clients before, but they truly are. Our audience, that's what gets our experts by and large, is that reach. But we hadn't thought about them in, maybe this sounds not very PC, but in monetary terms. But those individuals are really important to us in terms of both advertising dollars as well as subscription dollars. Mm-hmm. And the third is, I don't know if client is the right word, but user is just individuals who are looking to be smarter, faster. That's our mission and always will be our mission. And so we want to be serving people who are not paying for anything as well. That's really what was a catalyst for Big Think. And the business is obviously necessary to keep us going, but that's what we really want to be doing, is helping people get smarter, faster.
I love that. That's great. That's so crisp and precise too. So tell me a little bit about plans for bringing this book into the world. So you've got a month
yes.
before it comes out. So the book, again, just in case anybody is just joining us, is Digital Goddess. And it's the unfiltered memoirs of an entrepreneur, of a female entrepreneur. So what are you going to do to get it out there?
Well, so this is my first book, and you obviously are expert in this. I think typically there would be in-person talking events and things like that. Now there is none of that, but there are opportunities like the one I'm having with you now, and a lot of virtual interviews, and General Assembly and a few other large event organizations are doing virtual events with me. So all of this is fascinating to be a first-time author in this type of environment. And then, like you, there's the publisher, and have a PR team who is hopefully going and getting a lot of interviews and things like that.
So
and word of mouth. Really, my own network is very, very important. And that's how I'm here with you.
Absolutely. Well, it's always a pleasure to chat to you, and even more so in this format. That's really great. So if people wanted to learn more about Big Think, about where, well, I guess we all know where you are. You're not traveling very many places these days. How could people learn more?
So there's a marketing website called digitalgoddessbook.com. And then Big Think, obviously bigthink.com. Content changes on a daily basis. And as I mentioned, we have new formats all the time. And so just bigthink.com, those two places.
Those two places would be the best.
Yes.
That's absolutely great. So I guess in closing, so if someone was here, sort of had a business idea in the back of their mind, kind of not quite sure, what would you advise them to start sort of pulling together as they're thinking about, taking that leap, that leap of faith of, I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to go all in. What would some of the bits of the secret sauce be that you would recommend for them?
Well, my business school marketing professor would probably be correct me, but the way that I would think about it is to see, do I have an idea or a potential product that is differentiated? I would do a ton of research to see that there isn't something out there already like it. I would also ask myself, am I uniquely positioned to create this or build it or what have you? And if not, are there people out there that I can surround myself with who can help me do it? And so is it people, place, product, or something like that? I can't remember. There are 4 Ps, 3 Ps.
4 Ps, totally. 4 Ps.
Okay. But those, I think, things are fundamental. And then do I really have the chutzpah to go and do this, quit my job without something to fall back on? And something that I learned early on is it's really important from the get-go, once you decide to do it, to introduce yourself as an entrepreneur and not be wishy-washy about it. This is what I'm doing, this is what I'm building, and here's how I'm going to get there. And I think for women, even more, it's very important to be confident and express that you can do it and not be mealy-mouthed about it at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, and a lot of the research on women leaders basically says, women have this narrower range of acceptable behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're too nice and polite, you're a lightweight. But if you really go for it and say what you want, and you're aggressive and worse, have you bumped up against that a lot in this journey?
I have. Again, initially on, I think I thought that I had to be very aggressive to get investment and clients and things. And I was one of the last chapters of the book is trying harder to be softer. And the aggression really didn't serve me mentally, emotionally, and I don't even think it yielded the best results had I just been a gentler, more authentic person. So it has, I think I've run up against it, but it's because of my own self and my behavior.
That's fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating. Well, one of the things I'm finding most interesting, and I had Thomas Chamorro-Premuzic as a guest, and he talks a lot about we confuse confidence with competence. And we get bored with leaders who just sort of get on with it, right? And he uses a wonderful story. He says, imagine doing a TV documentary about Angela Merkel's day. She gets up, she has coffee with her husband, she goes to meetings for which she's well prepared. She has a pleasant lunch on the terrace, she comes home. What is the drama in that, right? And so I think it's very interesting that in this moment of pandemic, we're kind of looking now at really new leadership models. And interestingly to me, many of the countries that are doing well in containing the disease and trying to get life back to some semblance of normalcy, many of them are run by women. And so I think we're really beginning to get our heads around new models of leadership that are, as my friend Sally Helgerson would say, that they're what women have always known kind of how to do. There's this notion of being a softer leader or being a more authentic leader, letting, not having all the answers, those kinds of things. And I think one of the...
Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, and also women, I think, have a much more keen sense of what is acceptable. You never hear of, at least as far as I know, women like the recent CEO of McDonald's doing all of this, terrible stuff, sexual harassment and things like that. That just isn't in women's vernacular.
Well, it would be punished much more quickly, much more readily.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of research. It says any group that's in the minority understands a lot more about the group that's in the majority than the group that's in the majority understands about the group that's in the minority. Yeah, I loved, is his name Easterbrook? I loved his defense of why he should be allowed to keep. So for those of you that don't know the story, this guy, who is the former CEO of McDonald's, engaged in troublesome sexual behavior, was basically fired for it. But the board didn't say he was fired for cause. So now he's saying he should be able to keep his large severance payment because the board knew he was doing this terrible thing at the time he was doing it, and they didn't punish him for it then. And like on what planet? like if your kids came to you and with that kind of excuse, you'd never say that was all right. Right. So yeah, I think there's a sort of a sense of being allowed to get away with it, but sometimes I think groups that are in the minority get away with it a lot less. Yeah. Well, so any closing thoughts that you'd like to leave our group with? The book, again, Digital Goddess, available for pre-order now. And if you do pre-order, you get 6 chapters or something right away. So that's fun.
Lesson book and I think a few other things. But yes, there are some goodies you get.
Great. So any closing thoughts?
I think that it's important for me to say that, I love being an entrepreneur, and while the book is a really authentic look at what it's like, the ups and downs, etc., I would do it again. I love being an entrepreneur, and I would encourage anybody out there who is thinking of doing it to go for it.